Looking to take your financial knowledge to the next level? You're in the right place. Welcome to Ask Ralph, offering accounting, technical, and financial advice. Whether you're looking to save taxes or improve your business, he's got you covered. Here's your host of Ask Ralph, Ralph Eastup Jr.
Hello and welcome back to the Ask Ralph Show. Today we're going to start a series on credit. Now this is something that everybody is affected by, but not a lot of people understand all the individual components of credit. I've got a little bit of experience in this area in my past life before I got into the accounting profession. I actually ran a credit union in Newark, so I got involved a lot in the lending decisions. So I'm going to talk for you a few minutes now about what we're going to get into. We're going to start with a discussion of the 5 C's of credit. We're going to talk about how to qualify for credit. We're going to get into a discussion about building your credit, building it the right way, of course. We're going to talk about secured versus unsecured loans. And we're going to get into a whole discussion of credit reports, credit scores, and what makes up a credit report. So I hope this is going to be a good series for everybody. So let's jump right into it with the 5 C's of credit. Now, whenever you talk with a lender about getting credit, there are really the 5 C's, and it's kind of an easy way to remember what the individual lenders are looking for. You know, in its simplest sense, credit is money that is loaned to you with the understanding that it will be repaid. Pretty simple process. You know, they're going to give you money. You're going to give them money back. Now, of course, most of the time, you know, that requires money being paid back with interest. That's the little catch to it. You know, they're not just going to give you, you know, hey, Mr. Jones, here's $2,000. You give it back to me in a couple months when you have it, you know, and I'm not going to charge any interest. Maybe you can get a family member to do that, but it's probably not going to be something a bank or one of these other lending institutions are going to do. And the word credit really refers to your borrowing capacity, or how much a lender will let you borrow. So how does a lender determine that? You know, and when I was working in the credit union industry, I used to get this question a lot. You know, a member would come in and say, okay, well, I want to apply for a car loan. You know, how do I apply for a car loan? Well, as the lender, and in our particular organization, we had loan officers, and the loan officers had certain abilities to lend up to a certain amount based on credit and credit scores, and we'll talk about those things later. And then if the loan officer, you know, if the loan fell outside of that, they'd actually bring the loan to myself or somebody else in the organization. So really, when you make your application for credit, the lender is assessing your credit worthiness, and they're say that 10 times. Assessing your credit worthiness by looking at a few things: your credit history, your income, outstanding debts, and overall financial situation. But the real key to this is the 5 C's of credit. And the first one is character. What I'm talking about here is, do you pay your bills on time and in full? It also takes a look at, you know, how long have you been with your current employer? How long have you lived at your current address? What they're looking for here is, you know, are you stable? You know, have you had, you know, the same address? Have you had the same employer? You know, what is the length of time you've been with your employer? And that's a real good, very good portion of the lending decision. When I was making lending decisions, you know, that character was very important to me because it really spoke volumes about whether I thought someone was going to be a good risk and pay us back. The next thing, once we get past that character hurdle, is capacity. And capacity means, you know, what is your ability to repay a loan? You know, unlike the character, this is going to look at your income, not necessarily how long you've been with somebody, but what is your actual income? You know, your employment history and your credit history are good indicators of your ability to repay outstanding debt. The ratio of your outstanding debts compared to your before-tax income is known as your debt-to-income ratio, and a lot of people will call this your debt ratio. And in my view, a lot of lenders used to get hung up on this because there was that, you know, well, what is the debt ratio? What is the debt ratio? I know when I was working with the credit union, we kind of moved away from the debt ratio. We started looking at more at the credit scores. We started looking at what's called an unsecured debt ratio. And I'll talk about that, you know, as we get into this discussion a little bit longer. But capacity really looks at, you know, how much can this person who has good character afford to pay? So, for example, let's say you're borrowing money to buy a car, okay, and you're going to buy a car let's just throw a number out there. $30,000 is the purchase price of the car, and that's going to run you a payment of, let's say, $500. Well, we're going to look at, you know, how much income do you have? You know, do you have enough income in order to pay that? So, for example, let's say that you're going for that $500 car loan, and you tell me your income is $1,000 a month. Well, that scares me because now 50% of your income is going to go into that car loan. So that's one of the things we look at when we talk about capacity. While we're talking about a car loan, the next C hurdle we got to come across is capital. And capital really is the value of the assets that you own. What else do you have? Such as a car, real estate, savings accounts, and investments. And we use these to look at your ability to repay your loan. You may hear this called net worth, but this is your capital. What do you have of value? That's why when you make out an application, a lot of times they'll ask, do you own or rent your home? Do you have savings accounts? Do you have checking accounts? They want to find out, what else do you have that they can go after in the event that you don't pay? Plus, it really talks about your stability. If you've got a savings account with a sizable amount in it, if you've got a home that you've got equity in, all those things are sources of capital. The next one is collateral. And this one is, with a secured loan, such as the car loan we were talking about, is specific property you own is pledged as collateral to secure the loan. So, for example, let's say that $30,000 car is a Chevy Camaro, okay? And this Chevy Camaro is worth $30,000. Well, that's why you want to borrow $30,000. So, from the standpoint of collateral, the lender is going to say, okay, well, I'm lending, Mrs. Smith, $30,000 for this vehicle, and the vehicle is worth $30,000. Now, the truth is the lender is going to take a look at that and say, yeah, but that's not really true, because as soon as that car goes off the lot, it's going to have what's called depreciation. It's going to reduce its value substantially. So that's why in a lot of cases when we're looking at collateral, this is where a lender might say, well, yeah, that's right, Mrs. Smith, but we want you to put some money down. So they might say to you, hey, well, we're going to loan you, 80% of the purchase price. You're going to have to come up with that other 20% yourself. And the reason they're doing that is that protects the lender in the event that they have to go back and retain that collateral. So, for example, we did a lot of this, unfortunately, when we had an economic turndown in the credit union industry. Let's say I did that Camaro loan, and, let's say that something happened and this person lost their job. Now, obviously, we try to work with them, but when we get to the point where they're not paying at all, then I've got to make a decision about going out and repossessing that Camaro. So go out and get that Camaro. Well, guess what? When we go and collect that Camaro is now no longer worth what it was worth the day you purchased it. It's had some depreciation. And that's why we want to see some money down potentially based on your other C's of credit, whether your character, capacity, and capital. So that's where you might see a down payment. It's the same thing like when you talk about like a home equity loan. They're not going to give you 100% financing. If they do, the interest rates are going to be higher. And finally, the last thing that a lender will look at is the conditions, and that's the outside circumstances, such as the current economic and environmental conditions. If we're in a significant, time of downturn, lenders are going to be more skeptical about lending. Whereas if there's a economy that's growing, or if you're in an area where, jobs are easy to get and wages are increasing, that's going to make it easier when it comes down to the conditions that surround the loan. So this is really important. These 5 C's are really the difference in whether you're going to get a loan or not get a loan. So this is something you really want to take a look at and compare yourself and say, okay, what is my ability? What are my character? What's my collateral? What's my capital? So if this was helpful talking about the 5 C's of credit.
You've been listening to Ask Ralph, brought to you by Saggio Accounting Plus. Please subscribe to and rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a rating and review. Our podcast is produced by Carolyn Peters. Thank you for listening, and be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Ask Ralph Media. You can also hear me each week on 1450 WILM and on 1410 WDOV in Delaware, and on the iHeartRadio app. Submit your questions or ideas for future shows by sending an email to AskRalph@AskRalph.com.
The information contained in this episode of Ask Ralph is based on data available as of the date of its release. Saggio Accounting Plus and Ask Ralph Media Inc. is under no obligation to update this content if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances, and any information provided is not to be considered as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney before acting on any material covered.